Evolution.org Hardcore 2.0, episode 127 is coming your way. Today we're going to talk about life lessons that Mobster and I wish we knew beforehand from Para Pharma. So as you get older, of course, you wish you had a time machine you could go back in time and change some things. So first we're going to talk about life when it comes to life. And Mobster and I are going to have two different perspectives on that. Then we're going to talk about when it comes to training, what we wish we knew before when it came to training that would have accelerated us through life. When it comes to nutrition, we're going to talk about things with nutrition we wish we knew when we were younger. Next one, when it comes to steroid use, what do we wish we knew when it came to steroid use before? And then we're going to talk about why para products are so recommended. First, let's talk about when it comes to life. So I'm going to talk about a couple different things here. I'll talk about one thing and then I'll bring in Mobster. But look, when you're younger, your brain is still developing. Okay. Now your brain continues to develop, through your mid to late 20s. Okay. Your body continues to develop. Everything is developing, your reproductive system, everything. This is the time where you should be acquiring the most education and the most skills as
Yes,
possible while your
yes,
brain is open and willing to bring that in as a sponge. This is why when you grow up in a bilingual household, as an adult, you know how to speak the other language so easy. But once you get into your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s and then you try to learn a different language, it's fucking impossible. Really, once you get older, you really have to, live in another country to get to know that language. So it's important when you're younger to learn. If you want to learn a language, you got to learn it in your teens and 20s. You can't wait till your Mobster and I's age to start learning a language, for example. So one of the things I wish I'd done is even though I got a lot of education, okay, I was always a good student. It came very easy to me. I was the type of student I didn't even have to study. All right. I just went and I aced the test, no problem. But I still wish I'd gotten more education
yeah,
because you can never acquire enough education. Skills, you can never acquire enough skills. Now, there's an effort, there's always been this way. I mean, the past 100 years, has always been this way. Now it's obviously through the internet, social media, of the misery loves company crowd that's going to tell you, oh, college is a waste of time. Don't go to college. It's not worth it, whatever. And they just want you to be miserable like they are, and they want you to be losers like they are. And if you're not going to go to college, and some of you aren't good students, maybe you have ADHD, maybe you have dyslexia, and it's very difficult for you to sit there in class and listen to a teacher and then take a pop quiz. You can't do it. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It's just that the way your brain works is a little different. So in your situation, you got to do something with a little more action. So for you, you got to go to a trade school. You got to go learn
yes,
how to do
yes.
electrical, construction, roofing. You got to go do AC repair, appliance repair, something where hands-on auto mechanics. This is why a lot of people who are auto mechanics, they're not necessarily stupid people, but there's people that didn't couldn't they're like high school dropouts and stuff because they couldn't get through school because they have to be hands-on with stuff all the time. But again, doesn't make you I know a lot of smart people, moms are very intelligent people who have like ADHD and stuff like that, and they just could not sit in a classroom and concentrate. And I was a teacher. I taught some third grade and I taught high school, and I saw these kids, and it's not going to work. And you're not going to be able to, as a teacher, you don't have the means to always keep them ahead of the other kids in the class. You've got 20 kids in the class. You got to teach a certain way to cater to 18 out of those 20. There's always going to be a couple kids that are left behind. And it used to be back in your day, those kids with those issues were considered bad kids. They were considered these kids that they acted out or whatever. They get kicked out of school. They were the kids that always the dad used to beat them with a belt because, oh, why are you a bad kid? Why are you a bad kid? It's not that that's a bad kid. It's just that the kid has to be catered to a certain way and has to learn things differently. So you have to be more hands-on with things. You have to have a little more action. So don't give me that excuse, oh, Steve, I'm not a good student. I never got good grades. No, it doesn't matter. If you aren't a good student, you could still go to college and be a C student. Okay. College is a hell of a lot easier than high school. College, you've got
Let me jump in. Let me jump in here, Steve. So, the last but 1 year I had at high school, we had. He wasn't a very popular person, a deputy head of year called Ian Hogg, I believe. It's a long time ago, and in there was 16 weeks, I think, left before the big exams in the last year at school, before you'd go on to college and whatever else. And he gave us a big speech, which I didn't appreciate at the time, about these next 16 weeks being arguably the most important of your life. It's going to decide your career. So there was definitely a life lesson there. But I wasn't listening. 14 years of age, I was the same as Stevesmi. I was in the library, I was reading all the time. I think if we'd had a yearbook in the UK, I'd have been the kid most likely, all that kind of stuff. And then as soon as my balls dropped, Steve, my head went in a different direction, kind of obvious. And he's telling her, and I think it took me for about until the last 4 weeks before the big exams that the penny drops, and he'd given us great advice. So one of the things, and I kind of 50-50 on this, because I am of that generation, about the college/university thing, Steve. And it isn't, well, you've got the two issues. One, in America and the UK, massive, massive student debts, huge. And I would also argue possibly three things. Second one is choices. Make sure, guys, and this is super, super important. This is a lesson for me to be the pass on. Make sure that the courses, the degrees that you've chosen to do are useful. Do not choose dramatic arts if you're going to be a graphic designer. Do not choose something that's not related to IT if IT ends up being your thing. There is too much bullshit stuff out there. In the UK, Steve, literal studies, relatively easy to pass, gets you a degree, pretty much fucking useless for most jobs you can think of. So make sure at least a couple of the things you're studying are actually going to be useful enough. They might not be your favorite things, but they will be something that will get you a job, get you a career, help you pay those debts, get you into something that's going to help you pay the mortgage, etc. By all means, do something that you enjoy, art or drama or something. But for the most part, make sure it's useful for you. And the last one, and this is becoming more true here in the UK, and I suspect in America, is even with degrees, the gap, as it used to be in my time, between having a job without a degree and having a job with a degree was huge. You could pretty much add 50% to your income. If the income back in the day was 40,000, and it wasn't, but let's say it was 40,000 pounds, 50 something thousand dollars, then with a degree, you would add in £20,000, another $25,000, $30,000. Nowadays, the gap is much smaller. So the mechanical stuff, the apprenticeship stuff, ends up, ironically, Steve, I know people that have been to uni, got degrees, came out, and then had to serve apprenticeships anyway. So that's a question of choice. The student debt thing in America, it can easily be $500,000. So yeah, I would 100% agree with Steve, and I really do wish that I'd paid more attention and done more with my time and my skill set wherever else back in the day. So I definitely agree with Steve on that. And I definitely feel that
yeah.
the lesson, the words that Ian gave us, I should have paid more attention to, because I think I could have done more with it, and especially would have done more with it now. Back to you, Steve.
I think a lot of people too, including me, you chase women and you chase money when you're younger, a
Yes,
little too
yes.
much.
A little bit
Instead
of it,
of,
one or the other. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you chase it and you think that that brings you clout, okay? And it doesn't. Because what ends up happening is you chase women, you get women, you acquire money when you're younger, and you figure, well, I don't need college. I'm making money. I'm making money doing this, making money doing that. I knew a guy who used to sell sports tickets. He used to have a booth and he used to sell sports tickets. And every time he sell a sports ticket, he got like a commission. How's that job today? Nothing. It doesn't exist. Nobody buys sports tickets from a booth.
Why would you? You wouldn't.
Everyone goes on
No.
an app and
Yep.
orders an app, and it's right on your app. Nobody goes. When you go to a sports venue, you swipe your app when you get in. You don't have a paper ticket anymore. So
Steve,
his
one of my
job is
jobs back in the
done. His
day,
job is
I
done. It doesn't
literally I,
exist.
I literally used to have to be in, and it wasn't even my job, but one of my jobs, part of my job back in the day was telling the touts to fuck off, getting them off the street outside the theatres in London and stuff like that. It got to the point where you kind of half ignored them, but literally there'll be fellas standing outside the theatres and clubs just
Yeah.
before I was finishing my shifts, chasing them fuckers up, man.
So here's
So
the
yeah, it
thing,
does exist, doesn't exist.
when you do the right way in your teens and 20s, you focus on building skills and education. Once you get in your
Mm,
30s and 40s, you become the prized man where the women are going to flock to you and the money's going to flock to you
mm,
tenfold more than you could have ever dreamed of. That's the most important. The most prized man is one that's financially independent, that's well educated, you own your
yes,
own home, and you're
yes,
grounded with no baggage. You have no baggage.
yes,
You have no crazy exes, no kids, no,
yeah,
no problems, nothing that's going to drag you down. That's the most prized man. And in
mm,
that situation, you're going to have more women and more money than you know what to do with. So just be a little patient. That's what I wish I could have done better. I wish I'd have been a little patient, with that. And when you mentioned degrees, Mobster, finance, economics, something with money, even if you're not good
yes.
with money, that degree will go a
The
long
law,
way because there's always
law,
going to be a
yeah,
demand for that type of someone with a finance background. There's always going to be a demand. So look, acquire as much education as possible. And I'll give you another
yes,
example, military. Did you know in the military,
yeah. They'll support you. Yeah.
if you have a degree, that's not what I'm saying. In the military, when you have a degree, you can go to officer developmental school, and you graduate officer developmental school in a few weeks. You leapfrog people that are teaching you and yelling at you during that officer developmental school in rank.
Doesn't U.S. military, specifically the army, also help you with college costs, etc.? I think what
Yes,
the first one.
yes.
Yes,
So if
yes.
you, yeah, and that's another option too. Let's say you want to go into medicine, become a doctor, or even a lawyer, or any type of job like that.
Hmm.
You can go and join the military, okay? And they will pay for your education. Even after you're done with the military, they'll still pay for your education. There's a lot of perks in the military. There's as many perks in the military as anything. And that is a great way for you to get an education and not have to, like you said, Mobster, earlier, get into debt. But here's the thing, you have to repay the military. So you have to become an army medic, or you have to become an army lawyer, and you have to serve for them. So that's the payback. And then when you're done serving for them, then you can go on your own and do it on your own. So even if you're poor and you want to become a doctor, I actually almost did that myself, by the way. I was kind of leaning towards doing that, but I went in a different direction. But look, at the end of the day, um, you know, these types of jobs, like let's say again, you don't want to go to college, okay? You're like, I'm not a college type, Steve. I don't like going to school, whatever. Get into the trades, plumbing, construction, electrical, appliance, ECR. I'll give one example before I bring in Mobster. I used to know a dude that I played poker with. And I'm like, dude, you're here every fucking day, dude. Like, do you work? I was like joking with him, giving him a hard time. And he's like, you know what, Steve? I'm like pretty much retired. I'm like, well, what do you mean? How are you retired? You're like in your 30s. He's like, well, Steve, back in the 2010s, we had the kind of like a mini green boom in America, right? Where the government came in, the new administration, and they did a green program. So basically, what they did is they gave tax incentives for companies, big companies, to put in more energy efficient air conditioners or more energy efficient hot water heaters, whatever. So he
Yeah,
ended up picking up some contracts from that. And the guy was like in his late 20s. He ended up installing air conditioners, installing hot water heaters that were more energy efficient, like 80% more energy efficient. And he made $1 million in 2 years doing that. $1 million installing those. And he's like, Steve, I'm semi-retired. I just play poker. I do whatever I want now. I do some work on the side, but I don't really need to work. He's like, I bought a house.
yeah,
Everything's paid for. I bought a car. It's paid for. So I'm pretty much financially independent. I'm like, dude, you know what? That's fucking smart. And he never went to college. He never got an education. But what he did get an education in was how to install hot water heaters and how to install air conditioners. And he was fast. And that's what companies want. You show up, you do the job, here's the money, have a good day, and let me move on to my next job. So you still have to be smart and you have to be quick, even if you're not a good student. And he wasn't. I knew the guy from high school. He was a CD student in high school, but he still ended up becoming a millionaire because of the skill he acquired. Rather than him jerking around chasing women in his teens and early 20s, he went and he learned these trades. He went to school. He went to the local school to learn how to do these types of things. He could do electrical, he could do plumbing,
Yeah,
he
a
could do
trade
all
school,
that shit.
Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where he learned it. And it worked out beautifully for him. So you guys got to do
There's
it. Please go do
yeah.
it and don't listen to these idiots out there who want you to be losers the rest of your life.
Right. So listen, let's move on to another couple. We could do several shows with births, deaths, marriages, and dramas, but I want to give a little bit of advice, especially to the younger listeners. And in fact, Steve and I have had multiple conversations about this particular subject, Steve, and we call it the side hustle. Okay. So I would argue, I think in both America and the UK, it still applies. It is incredibly difficult now, even with good jobs and the massive amounts of debt that people get themselves into, even with college education, to really do the things that most people want to do with one income. So Steve and I said we call this a side hustle. I'm actually kind of like the person that Steve just spoke about. I don't have a mortgage anymore. It's paid off in 8 years. I haven't had a mortgage for 20 something years, Steve. The last two houses, whatever, have been paid for by the money from the previous house. So I'm in that position. I'm also, and I say on this on the shows, kind of half retired, semi retired. So I do okay. Thank you very much. But that's just for being sensible, accepting certain particular things which I don't think are important, spending money on the things that I enjoy, and so on and so forth. But that's another topic for another day, perhaps another life lesson. So the side hustle, right? I'll give you an example, Steve. Two people I've given the same conversation slash advice to that works behind the counter at my local gym, and they are staff. And all of the people that are staff work part time. The actual owners, Paula and Gareth Parkman, they're more 30, 40 hours a week. Everyone else is roughly 10, 20 hours a week. And in one particular case, Alex worked there for, I think, 6 months, a young lady, uh, daughter of one of the members. And she was a really good cake maker, a really good cheesecake maker, to the point of showing me photographs and bringing me in a sample. And I said, Alex, you've got a little kid. You're doing this part time, 10, 15, 20 hours a week job. You should be doing this other thing at the same time. You should be making one for the family and then buying enough to make two and sell the second one. And the larger cheesecakes can easily go for American equivalent $30, $40. And that's without getting fancy and posh and whatever else. This is just a big family sized cheesecake, but it's been homemade. Why don't you have this as your side hustle? Why don't you do this? More recently, Lewis works behind the counter. Same thing again. He's not doing enough hours, Steve. That's going to pay his mortgage, pay his rent, or whatever else. It's just enough to keep him doing this or keep him doing that. But it's not a full time job. It's not a full time salary. I said you need another income. Now, typically, Steve, this could be something that you enjoy, that you're kind of good at. It might be a craft making, it might be knitting, it might be some sort of educational thing, coaching. Steve has coached, I know. I've done coaching in the past. I don't want to be a full time PT, but on occasion, I've done this stuff. And for the most part, I can give it up if the person's not pulling the weight. If I don't feel I don't need the money, but I would do it for the pleasure. But the money can be okay. I spend it on food. I'll spend it on something else. So for me, it's a second string income. Uh, Things that people like to do with cars. You'll be fixing your car all the time. You're really good with your hands fixing a car, but you've got a day job in an office. You could be doing your neighbour's cars for small fees. You could be literally, Steve, almost trading your work for food, trading your work for those cheesecakes. They could be cooking you a roast dinner, something, and it takes the sting out of the bills, etc. that you're paying. And again, this is because most people in this day and age, even if they're close to six figures, Steve, they struggle to pay their bills, they struggle to be able to afford holidays, and so on and so forth. So as long as you're not working, I have done this myself. I have literally worked the equivalent of three jobs. I did a full-time job with the Met Police, one that I've described in previous shows. I was doing the magazine, my little Muscle Mob magazine. I was coaching a couple of fellows, just a couple of clients, and I had a lodger. And I think we even had the protein business. So what's that? That's five different kinds of income all at the same time. And I realized I was working from 7 o'clock in the morning prior to that getting to work, and then from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night until I felt, what the fuck are you doing, you crazy bastard? So I actually eased back a little bit. But I had the energy, I had the willpower, etc. And I honestly was, I think I was getting equivalent to 80% of my normal day job income, another 80% again over and above that with all the other side hustles. And I actually cut back to that. It needed to be that I wasn't working. It needed to be pleasurable and I could make money. I think I also had an ebook at the same time, Steve. So there's something actually. Let me just do the ebooks thing. Right, we do these shows. These shows go on different media channels, iTunes, on the website, on YouTube, and so on and so forth, SoundCloud, etc. In this day and age, guys, if you have any speciality knowledge, this is just on the ebook thing. Steve's done an ebook. I've done an ebook. You can easily produce 20, 30,000 word ebook, less. Have someone help you with proofreading, layout, etc., make it professional. And you can sell these things via affiliates. That's how I made money back in the day. And it's literally, especially if it's a popular subject in this day and age, Steve, on Amazon, as onto ebooks or readers, ebook readers, etc. Never needs to be in print. You don't have to have the publishing cost. You share the percentage of income with Amazon or whoever sells the book on your behalf. And there are literally AI programs now that will help you with this. And you could write 20,000 words a month, Steve, put it into some sort of usable format about a subject that people are interested in, and this stuff brings you money forever. And this is just an example. So what do you think about having a side hustle, extra income in this day and age, Steve, as a piece of advice, life advice for people?
Yeah, and I'll finish out on that, but also what you mentioned earlier about getting an education. The military is an option, but also scholarships. There's literally so many scholarships out there that you should be getting. So it's important to get good grades in high school because this way, the better grades you get, the more scholarships you open up to go to pub.
Sorry, Steve. Some businesses will send you to college or university 1 day a week, and you work in the normal
Yeah,
job four
that's
days a
true
week. So
too.
yeah,
And
yep,
then when you graduate, you work for them, so they get something from you. And then also go to public universities. Private universities are sort of a scam. They're not it's not necessarily better education. Some of them are really good, obviously, but it's not necessarily better education where it's worth it to put yourself into $300,000 of debt. Just to go to a private. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference. When you're going to apply for a job, they want to see that degree. They don't even care what your grades were. They want to know that you have a degree. So that gives you a huge advantage. A lot of jobs won't even look at you unless you have a degree. So if you don't have a degree going forward, you're fucked. And you mentioned about the gaps in education in America. It's a gender gap. And most of our people that listen to our podcast are males. So females are getting educated way more than
better.
males. A lot of that has to
Yes,
do with males, they want to get out of the house. They want to be independent, much younger.
yep,
Women will stay
yep.
living with their parents and, go to college at the same.
Same in the UK, Steve.
Yeah.
60% of
But
people graduating college and university women.
yeah, it's getting wider and wider and will continue to
Yep,
widen
yep,
up because
yep.
we're the only people with bodybuilding shows telling you to go get an education. The other bodybuilding shows are telling
Yeah,
you, oh,
true.
education is a waste of time because they're all
Yeah,
meathead bodybuilders. All they know what to do is stick steroids up their ass. They don't know anything else in life. That's all they do. And they've been able to make a living at it. But the thing is, like, why not cover all your bases? What is my point? Get an education, get the skills that I talked about. A lot of the
yes.
colleges have classes where you can go learn how to fix an air conditioner, how to do electrical, and you get credits on top of it. So you can do that. And you can
And
build.
that skill could be your side hustle, Steve.
But also, when you get older and you have your own house, you could fix your own air
Oh,
conditioner. You could
please.
fix
Yeah,
your own
yeah,
hot
yeah,
water
yeah,
heater when it
yeah.
breaks. You could fix your own. It's going to save you a fortune. I know people, their air conditioner keeps breaking over and over, and they keep calling different people to come fix
Two,
their air
three hundred
conditioner.
dollars a time. Yeah.
More than that, and the people that come out, they're fucking idiots. They don't fix it. They're just bunch of scammers. So to have the skill to fix your own roof, to fix your own, air conditioner, your own washer and dryer, your own plumbing, that's a great skill to have as a homeowner, and it's going to save you a fortune over the long term. That's a moneymaker in itself. So you got to acquire these skills. So let's move on to, we'll talk about this subject in the future. Let's move
Yeah,
on.
let's do some more of those in the future. Let's
Yeah.
talk about training,
Yeah.
Steve.
Give us some
What
training
have you learned
things.
about training that you didn't think that
All right.
you knew? which you'd known before?
You want me to go first on that? Look,
Yeah, you go first. I've got loads
when
of
it
them.
comes to training, I talked about this on podcasts before. The mistake I made was when I was training and growing and building more strength and building more muscle, okay? I wasn't doing the maintenance. So it's like having a car and not changing the tires, rotating the tires. If you have a gas car, not taking it for your oil changes, not checking things right properly. So you have to do the maintenance, but you have to do it properly on your car. If you go to a sporting event and you get there early, this is why I always tell bodybuilders this who are stubborn on the subject. I just talked to one over the weekend that he just tore his shoulder, even though I told him ahead of time exactly what I'm about to tell you guys. I said,
Yes,
go early to the games or go to the practices. They spend more time warming up,
yes,
stretching, doing the different things, okay? Doing quick little sprints and then stopping and getting their bodies ready for the game than they do actual game. How much game time do they actually have in an American football game? A lot of players might only be out there for 10 minutes out of a 60
yeah,
minute game, but they're still
yeah,
spending like 3 hours warming up, and they do stuff in that you don't see too in the locker room. They're stretching, they're getting massage, they're putting warm hot ointments on their muscles to loosen things up.
yeah.
They're on the sideline. They got bicycles on the sideline. They're bicycling to keep their legs warmed up. But you as a bodybuilder, you walk in there, and this is me, by the way. This is Steve, who was in his early to mid 30s. Me as the Steve, and most of you out there too.
Straight on the bench.
Yeah, you get to the gym, you're like, you know what? I don't gotta warm up. I'm an alpha. I'm gonna get in there and throw on one plate, and
How many times, Steve, do
I'm gonna
we
throw
see?
on two plates. I'm gonna throw on three plates. Fuck
Yeah, yeah,
warming
yeah,
up. That's
yeah.
for
They don't.
pussies. Fuck stretching. That's for pussies. I'm gonna leave the gym. After the gym, I'm not gonna stretch. I'm just gonna go home and have a steak because I'm a real man. How many people do? That's what I did. That's exactly what I did. Every day after the gym, I wouldn't stretch. I get in my car, drive home. I stop at the butcher shop and get a steak and go home and cook it. That was my stretch. Was eating the steak. That was my only stretching. I wasn't warming up. I wasn't stretching. What ended up happening? Injuries, 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 and it ruined everything for me. Tore my shoulder up, herniated disc. Okay. So you've got to invest in your body maintenance. Inversion table is a great investment. You got to do it beforehand. Don't wait until the problem happens. Number two, yoga. If you're not, you got to stretch after your training. If you aren't willing to do a good stretching, go to a yoga class. Very, very important. Number three, okay, warming up beforehand, especially on a cold day. You get in there, you spend solid amount of time warming up. If the bench press is occupied, you can't get in a good warm up, then go to the side and do some push-ups, or go to the side and do some light dumbbells, okay? And warm up that chest before you hit it. Warm up those shoulders. Do circles with a 5 or 10 pound weight. Really get those shoulders nice and loose. All right. It's very, very important to do maintenance on the body. If you don't do maintenance, you're going to get injured. So that's the number one thing when it comes to training, Mobster.
I want to segue into injuries, Steve. How many times in recent years on the logs, on the forums, and probably including me and you, do we see members that are dealing with an ongoing injury? Now, I'm old enough and ugly enough just for sheer wear and tear and training for the length of time that I've been training to have niggles. I think I literally listened to professional strength athlete saying that they went to the doctors recently and the doctor said, "Have you got any pain?" And I've actually seen a meme that reflects this. And he says, "Well, being pain free is normal, doctor." It's almost like a joke, as though if you push yourself really, really hard, you're going to have niggling pains. What we're seeing is even what I would call normal members who just want to get in shape, just want to be a bit more muscular, etc., etc. And they might have only been training 5, 10 years, Steve, will have some sort of injury. And the most common will be shoulder joint, followed probably by knee slash hip, and then the elbow. But the shoulder joint is probably far and above ahead of the rest. So key and definitely a life lesson when it comes to training, Steve. You and I have said this multiple times on the forums. Guys, there are times when you need to ease the fuck back from doing the thing that you're constantly doing because you love to train, because you want to look a certain particular way. You need sometimes literally to stop, not ease back, stop. Take time off. You can still train other body parts. You can still train stuff almost around that joint. What you can't do is keep pounding the fuck away with 5 delta exercises, just lateral type work, free overhead kind of press variants, some sort of tricep extension overhead stuff, etc., Stephen. Some of the back movements, some of you doing, and think that your shoulder's going to be okay when you're actually literally in physical pain, and you do not want to be the person that ends up getting a shoulder joint repaired, replaced, operated on, whatever. So sometimes you literally just need to stop the fuck for a couple of weeks, carry on training legs, Steve, maybe do some arm work, bicep work, maybe some sort of weird tricep stuff where you're not moving a shoulder joint, but literally stop with the volume and the constant pounding around that particular joint. And again, the same advice applies whether it's the knee, the elbow, the hip, or whatever. Rest, rehab, look at BPC, look at TB 500, look at the products like that Para Pharma sells. But definitely look after your joints. You will be, and this is again a life lesson, as Steve said, our demographic is 18 to 25, maybe a little bit older, Steve, and majority male. And it's almost some kind of machismo type bullshit that we will work through the pain because I do what I do. I get it. I get it. I've had
Yeah.
aching shoulder joints. So
So
talk
really,
about that a little bit, Steve. We
oh,
see it
really
so
quick,
much.
really quick on that. Here's the problem. When you're in your teens and 20s, I used to get injured. I used to go bicycling or whatever. Or I used to do all kinds of crazy shit when I was a teenager. And I'd fall and I'd have these huge scabs on my knees or I'd twist my ankle or anything like that. And the weird thing is, like, within a few days, I was 100%. But when you get older, see, because, and that's the same thing with weight training. When you're in your 20s and you're training, you'll have a little nagging injury here and there, and then it'll just get better in a few days on its own. But when you get older, that doesn't happen. So I think what happens too is you get used to, you know what, I'm just going to work, I'm just going to keep training through this injury because it's
Yeah,
going to get better when you're younger. And then as you get older, you don't realize that that injury that you try to train through
constantly
it
inflamed.
becomes chronic. And
Yeah,
then it just never goes away, and then you're stuck with it for years. So that's the problem. It's not just it's the macho mentality, but it's also that. It's also the knowing that yeah, I can just work through this injury and I'll be okay when you're not going to be. And these
yeah,
nagging
not anymore.
injuries are
Not
such
anymore.
a pain in the ass because there's nothing you can do except rest and rehab them, as Mobster said. So that's just the way it is. So I think Mobster and I both agree on the training subject when it comes to this is
What
that
about steroids, Steve? What do you wish you'd known?
well, let's talk
What
about
lessons can you
nutrition.
pass on? Yeah, a little bit.
Let's
Yeah.
let's talk about nutrition because we still have a lot of time left. So look, when it comes to nutrition, I think the nice thing about nutrition, more than training, I think, is there's so much that we've learned about nutrition over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years that would blow us away. And I think that one of the things that I've learned is how advantageous it is to consume organic. And I learned that in my mid 20s. I didn't know anything about organic before that. But once I started eating organic foods, especially when it comes to produce. I'm not talking about chips, organic chips versus regular chips. Okay, I'm not talking about that. That's a scam.
No,
I'm talking
it's
about
still
actual.
chips. It's still
Look, I'm talking
chips.
about actual produce. Like
Yeah,
you take
yeah,
an
yeah.
organic tomato versus a regular tomato. The organic
Yes.
tomato is going to be far superior for you. Same thing with vegetables, spinach, lettuce, romaine, blueberries, apples, all, these things, especially that are exposed, that you're actually eating the skin and that you're cooking, it's way superior to eat organic versus non-organic. And I wish I had known that even younger, but I didn't figure that out till my mid 20s. So I wasn't too late on that. Another thing I wish I had known when I was younger too is about food timing and how to, when you're training, don't use food as a disadvantage. And what I mean by that is when I used to do triathlons, I would see people pull over and throw up during the triathlons, or I'd see people finish a triathlon and throw up. And they were eating and drinking the wrong things ahead of time. And for
Yeah.
me, I went through the same thing. Sometimes I'd stop and dry heave, along the way. So it's very, very important to know that your body doesn't want to have to process things that are hard to digest when you're putting your body through stress. And leg day, we used to have a guy on the forum. He'd say, "Oh, whenever I do squats, I have to run to the bathroom and throw up." And he's like laughing about it. I'm like, "Dude, that's not. Why are you laughing about it?
Yeah.
There's no need for
I've
that.
never had that. Never.
There's no need." I'm like, "Dude,
No. Whoa.
you don't have proper nutrition before you do squat day. Everything you eat leading into your squats is going to be in your system, right? So if you're eating wrong things and you have to go squat or do any type of heavy weight training, which your sessions should be tough unless you're doing kind of a maintenance session. But if you're doing a tough session on steroids, these are going to be tough sessions, and you eat the wrong thing, your body's going to want to get rid of it because your body's under stress. Your body's like, "Oh my God, I'm under stress. I'm under stress." The first thing it's going to want to do is get rid of everything in your system. And it's going to
Yes.
want to get rid of it either through your ass, your penis through
Yep.
urination, or
Yep.
through your mouth. And a lot of times it ends up being through your mouth because that's the quickest way to do it.
Easiest, quickest. Yeah.
So any undigestible food is going to go through your mouth, obviously. So it's your body's going to want to expel it. So it's important to mealtime. And if you're going to have a workout, if you're going for strength, have a meal 2 hours prior and make it an easy to
Yes. Yes.
digest meal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is what I used to do when I was strength training. I used to do a cup, maybe 2 eggs, okay, lightly cooked, but cooked. I wouldn't eat them raw. I'd eat them cooked, because I don't want to freak my body out with a ton of bacteria. So you want to make sure you burn off that bacteria and cook them, but you don't fry them in nasty oil. You lightly cook them properly, okay? And then I'd add maybe a couple toasts that were like Ezekiel bread, good quality bread,
Yep.
not the shitty brand from the supermarket on the shelf, the good quality bread, the live bread that's made of natural ingredients. Or I'd have some fruit, okay? And that would give me that would basically fill up my muscles with some glycogen, and then on strength day I'd be able to go train. Another thing that I wish I knew was on non-strength days, what is the best way to train? Fasted. Okay. That is the best way to train. Now, why? What I say earlier, when you train fasted, your body doesn't have to process food. Okay. So have some sips of water. That's all you need and go work out. It may be hard to do this at first, but after 2 or 3 weeks, your body will adjust. You'll become more insulin sensitive and you'll find that training fasted is more energetic. It's going to give you more agility. You're going to be light and you're going to feel fantastic training fasted. On strength days, fill up your glycogen stores a couple hours prior with a good meal. But on non-strength days, if you're not strength training, it's a huge advantage to train fasted. And I wish I had known that prior because everybody always says, "Oh, you got to eat, you got to eat." These commercials on TV, the food companies want you to eat a big breakfast. "Oh, we got to eat a big breakfast. If you're going to have a good day, you got to eat breakfast." Bullshit. And that's another thing. Breakfast is bullshit. Okay. And that's another thing that we've learned over the past, 15, 20 years or 30 years is that breakfast is basically a scam by food companies to sell you all these breakfast foods. So skipping breakfast is great. You see professional athletes, whether they're MMA or football players or Tom Brady or any of these guys, they do, even guys like Rob Gronkowski, one of the top tight ends ever, and then another guy, King Henry, the running back. Um, he's he doesn't eat breakfast. His first meal is usually 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And a
Yeah.
lot of players, the day of the game, they won't eat. You ask them, what'd you have for breakfast? Oh, you had a great game. What'd you have for breakfast? Ha ha ha. And you know what they say? They say, oh, I don't eat breakfast. And the lady looks at them like, huh? You don't eat breakfast? Because breakfast is a scam. Why would you throw food at your body as soon as you wake up? Doesn't make any sense. Unless your goal is mass and strength and just getting bigger and bigger. There's no need to throw food at your body first thing in the morning and
As,
boot
as,
and
as,
throw off your
as you know,
insulin.
Steve, as you know, I eat very, very little in the morning. I've talked about this on shows. I think I had the equivalent, probably 4 ounces of oatmeal this morning. And I do strength train, as listeners know. So, something that Steve and I want to expand on this ever just a little bit, Steve. You and I have talked about this multiple times, right? There are people that will overcomplicate and kind of confuse nutrition a little bit. And I 100% agree with Steve on the organic, read a certain way, locally produced. We've talked about this on other shows. But something that Steve and I talked about multiple times is we say that in nature, in terms of the development of man and specifically the development of nutrition, something arguably changed in the last couple of years. And it's because of the shit that most people eat with the processed food. For the whole of humanity, literally since we stood up and stopped swinging from the fucking branches of trees and became what might be vaguely recognizable as human beings. We talked about the way that we had to chase after animals, the way that we had to hunt, the way that we had to search around for food to eat, etc., etc. And Steve and I have described many, many times how incredibly adaptable the human body is. And the idea that needs to do this or that or the other in certain particular ways, for example, you must have this amount of food in the morning to set you up for the day, is bullshit. Because again, if your job involves, for example, sitting on your ass in an office, you don't need to have what we call full English or ham and eggs for breakfast. You do not. You don't need some of the people I know that coach Steve will have half a sleeve, mind you, of Weetabix. That's like 12 fucking wheat biscuits. I have two. And then I do the stuff that I do on leg days or chest days or back days. So literally minimal amount of breakfast. Something that Steve, I'll just give you an example again. Back when I had to work an actual day job, and I've talked about this before, a late turn. So that would be 11 till 7, 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. We'd actually get away from work about 6:30 of the nature of the job. I would make sure that roughly 2 hours before the end of the workday and before I'm going to get to the gym, so 2 hours before I go to the gym, I would have 100-gram flapjack. And this is literally just, I've had my lunch, I've had food at work when I arrived, I've had breakfast in the morning. All I'm doing is fueling with roughly 400 calories, Steve, the workout to come. I would have a coffee just before I got on the train. It's literally like a £1, $1 something cup of coffee from Burger King, of all places, at the railway station. Half asleep on the train, literally zoned out. And by the time I got off the train, I'm alert because of the caffeine, but I've also got that 400 calories in my system. Go hit the workout. And if you'd have seen me 10 or 15 minutes before the workout started, 2 stops away from the railway station that I get off at, I'd be zoned out, half asleep. But 15, 20 minutes later, I'm in the gym, warming up, hitting it, and sometimes had some of my best workouts of the week on that 300 or 400 calories from the oatmeal flapjack and on the small $1 something or other cup of fucking Java. And then ready to rock and roll. Food would have already been cooked for when I got in, high protein meal, and then straight to bed. I've not been one for staying up late or whatever else. Something I want to touch upon in that particular regard, Steve, and when it comes to nutrition, it can be complicated. So what we talked about earlier on actually applies here. Please apply some of what you do when it comes to training, bodybuilding, steroids, etc. Set aside some of that educational time that we touched upon to learn. Stevesmi and I have had conversations where I've learned from Stevesmi, learned from the guys on the boards. Do not stop learning what you do about nutrition or training or whatever else, even if it's only to make you think in a certain particular way, Steve. So, any more on nutrition before we move on to steroids as well?
Yeah, we'll talk about it more in the future. Let's
Yeah.
talk about steroid use. So let me give one life lesson that I learned, and I'll let you come in, Mobster, to give one, and I'll probably give another one as well. But one of the lessons I learned was with Trenbolone. And Trenbolone ruining relationship is it ruined every relationship when I got on it. Hurting my health in the process because it definitely caused a lot of strain on my health. I mean, the blood work on Tren is just unbelievable the way it fucks up your blood work. And then getting more injuries on trend because trend makes you so fucking strong and bigger so fucking fast that your body can't keep up, your joints can't keep up, your soft tissues can't keep up. So you're opening up yourself to injuries when you use trend. And all those things, I wish I understood. The only thing I wish, I don't regret using it, but the only thing I wished was in that 3 year span, I didn't abuse it so much. Like time after time, like it was a 3 year span, right? In my early and mid 30s, where I used trend, and I'd cycle it on and cycle it off for 3 straight years. And I wish I'd taken a break. So I always tell guys now, once a year run a trend cycle. That's it. And then run something else the next time. And maybe run
Mm.
something else the next time and then go back to trend. Like don't run trend back to back to back to back to back because what ends up happening is all these things that I just talked about come back to bite you and it will catch up to you. So I think in the process I probably took some time off my life by abusing trend, but I also, you know, hurt myself and cause some injuries. Like I tore my shoulder when I was on trend because I was benching over 400 pounds, and I'm only a 5'5", 5'6" guy. How many 5'5", 5'6" guys lean can bench over 400 pounds? Not many. And the only reason I could do it was because of trend.
Yeah.
I had basically for years been a strength athlete and then I was using Deca and I was using Sustanon and testosterone and D-Bol, some of those strength steroids. I got really strong. And then once I got on trend, I was already strong as fuck. And that made me even more strong as fuck to the point where my body couldn't handle being that strong. And the only thing I could have done differently was slow down on the trend because it wasn't the first trend cycle where I tore my shoulder. It was probably like the fifth trend cycle, you see? So if I'd taken proper breaks in between using trend and not try to improve in a consistent linear fashion, take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or even 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, that would have made more sense and that would have prevented the injury. So that's the regrets I use with steroid use, basically overdoing it on the steroids. Even though I didn't overdo it as much as some of these other guys, Mobster. I never ran trend
Yes. Yes.
more. The most I ran trend was 400 milligrams a week, but I
Yeah.
usually stuck to 300 to 350 a week. So I didn't even abuse it. It's just that I used it too many times in a row. So that's what I would have changed.
Let me expand on that, and I'll talk about another one as well, Steve. So it's fun, and Steve have done, and I have done multiple shows on this when we talked about pro cycles and the dosages that pros use. And it gets us attention. It gets us traction. Absolutely, people want to know what that absolute freak of nature may or may not have done when it comes to using PEDs. But the lesson is that you are, for the vast majority of you, 99.9% of our audience will not end up on the Olympus stage. Most of you don't want to. Most of you want to get in shape, be more muscular, get yourself girls, look good for the beach, etc. One or two of you might have competitive aspirations, and a very fractional percentage of you might end up competing at a high level and on stage. So here's the thing, and this is definitely a life lesson. You will see people that they want to sell you steroids that for machismo purposes, bullshit purposes, the kind of silly conversations we like to have with our bros, etc. So I wrote down saying bro science and pro doses, Steve. You do not need pro cycle dosages when it comes to steroid stacks. You do not need to have 5 steroids. You do not need to be using every peptide there is. You do not need to be doing 16 or 20-week competition type cycles for most people's aspirations. So it's fun to talk about. That's number one. Number two is the bro science aspect, Steve. Uh, I shouldn't laugh, but I do. And I sometimes have to explain why I've laughed. This is with buddies at the gym, people that I'll talk to, people that I'll break bread with and bullshit with, etc., etc. And sometimes I'm like, okay, why are you doing that? And who told you to do that? And this whole stuff, the conversations you have about steroids in the gyms, 99.9% again are bullshit. It's kind of like random stuff they found on the internet, or someone's doing this and he didn't mention his nutrition. He doesn't mention his training. He just talked about the steroids. And the amount of the sort of confusion over AIs, the confusion over time off. Listen, we do shows on those very subjects. The cycles that when we give you advice for what most of our listeners want tend to be moderate, and we know what works. We would, as an example, I've actually quoted one of my buddies, and I actually used to listen to one particular piece of advice of his, which regards pyramiding up and pyramiding down, specifically on orals, which makes no sense. If you're shut down, you're shut down. So you might as well go in at a certain level and stay the fuck there to the end of the cycle. The amount of people that don't PCT or don't PCT properly, Steve, because of bro science. The amount of people that we had one the other day, Steve. He was running, I think, a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about a wet steroid and a dry steroid, but the aspiration was just to be dry, to be lean. So we said, well, why are you doing this then? Oh, my buddy at the gym said I should be using Debo. And we're like, no, 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 no. That's not your first choice. You'd have to work that much harder to stay in shape. Why don't you do this instead? So it's almost kind of fucked up because of the surfeit, the vast amount of information that's now available. It can be overwhelming. We get that. So we try to do these shows to make that information relatively clear, and we back this up. Steve's done ebooks on it. I've written articles. There are some great references. There's still some great references and articles on the forums that we link to constantly. I would argue, Steve, that most people, like I said, don't listen to the dealer. Don't live with someone who's selling you steroids, even if it's a buddy. For the most part, the conversations you're having about stories with Jim aren't even long enough to get into the whys and wherefores and the back and forth. And I've literally had conversations with people where three of us were discussing it, and arguably, because I do these shows with Steve, all three of us would give an advice, and every single reply in regards to one or two responses seemed to be different. And it shouldn't be vastly different. It should be kind of the same. Even the way that you train and your nutrition and your age will affect some of the outcomes. But for the most part, there's a kind of 60, 80% should be agreeable, should still apply to everybody, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you come to, for example, these podcasts, talk to Stevesmi and I, come onto the forums and get solid advice. If we have 20 replies, 16, 17 of those replies should be all around the kind of ballpark area in terms of we might argue a little bit about 50 or 100 milligrams. We might argue to see the difference between 8, 12, or 16 weeks. But for the most part, the information should be the same. There's a course, and I can think of a couple of examples, I'm not got the name, where it's almost tongue in cheek, training every time or up the dose, but that's almost tongue in cheek. It's kind of half fun, and we take it in that particular way. But for the most part, you know, uh, as an example, Steve, we argue about whether you should do orals for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. But for the most part, no one's saying you should not use an oral. We're just arguing about the amount of time on. Uh, Kickstarters and finishers, we might argue about that. But obviously, they have their place for some listeners, for some users, and so on and so forth. So, for the vast and great majority, we keep all of us relatively simple, kind of sensible dosages. We're not trying to sell you specific steroids. The people at the gym, people that used to sell steroids out the trunk of a car, is going to sell you what they have, not necessarily what you want. And you don't need to do that anymore. With approved sources like Para Pharma, you have everything you could possibly need. So you don't need to have some random steroid because that was all that's available. It's that kind. It's weird, Steve. I'll see people that I was off for 4 weeks. I went and back on for 4 weeks. Okay, did you PCT? I know I couldn't do it for this reason. I couldn't do it for that reason. You're like, okay, you do realize that's kind of yo-yoing steroid use. You haven't really come off. You haven't had these kind of conversations. And again, it's just sometimes the way guys' minds work. Some of it's just because we literally only have 5 or 10 minutes on these conversations at the gym and so on. So, what do you think about the bro science, Stephen,
Yeah.
pro dosages before we
Yeah,
move
and
on?
a lot of it is a ruse, just like anything else. A lot of people think just because someone has money that they're smart when it comes to money. A lot of times it's the opposite. A lot of times it's just they're just trust fund babies, and they've actually lost more money than they've actually made throughout their life because they inherited so much money and they've lost it all. Whoop de doo. That doesn't make them smart with money. And it's the same thing in bodybuilding. Just because someone has big muscles, just because someone has a big following on Instagram or whatever, doesn't mean that they know what the fuck they're talking about. A lot of these, you take an athlete, for example, take a professional football player. I use that example again. They couldn't coach themselves out of a paper bag. Okay. But
Yeah.
they're great athletes, but they have coaches that coach them. They're not coaches. So hiring a pro bodybuilder or hiring a guy who with big muscles to coach you and show you how to use steroids
Mm.
a lot of times doesn't make much sense because they have the genetics and you don't. So I mean they're basically getting by on their genetics. They don't know anything about nutrition. They don't know anything about weight training. They don't know anything about steroids. They just know to stick their ass with steroids and call it a day. And they grow because they have the genetics. So it's important to know that it is a big ruse, the bodybuilding industry. I'm just amazed, and I've some of these guys that I've worked with over the years, they've been around a long time and they never learn shit in 20 or 30 years. It's kind of like the people I go fishing with. I know there's people that go fishing like 5 times a week. They've been going for 20 years and they still suck at fishing. I still go there. I go there once a month and I catch more fish than them because I have a good skill for fishing and
Mm.
I'm smart and I can figure out what bait to use and I know how to adjust things to cater to the wind and the water conditions and everything and what's biting that day, but they just not good at it. And it's the same thing. So just because someone has been in the industry a long time doesn't make them smart. Just because they wrote for some magazine back in the 80s doesn't make them smart. A lot of times it's just a big ruse out there to kind of trick. It's kind of like poker. You see these pro professional poker players, and then you look them up, and they're fucking losing players. They lose money. You can look up how much a player wins or loses online, and they're losing players. Well, how are they living and driving these nice cars and all that? This is a big fucking ruse. They're doing that to trick you. So in the bodybuilding world, the ruse is showing off an image and then getting you to buy my products, getting you to buy my
Yes.
supplements and stuff like that. That's the roots of bodybuilding. So, and that's one of the life lessons too, is be very skeptical of the things you see out there. Be very skeptical. There's always this. I interviewed some dude years ago, and he's like, "Oh, I have this secret strategy that's gonna beat steroids. Secret
Yeah.
soft stuff that I'm developing that's
Yeah.
gonna beat steroids." He never developed shit.
Never happened.
I think the
Never
guy's in
happened.
prison now because the whole time he was pushing his supplement line, he actually
Yes.
got caught dealing steroids or something like that. And now he's in prison. He was actually like counterfeiting steroids. But anyway, like it's just a big ruse because that's a marketing strategy and that's how bodybuilding
If
is. It
if on that one, Steve, if someone's selling supplements, promise you steroid-like results, that's a scam. There's an enormous. We could do a whole show. I think we've
yeah.
actually done a show in the past on the supplement scams and the things that people have come away with. Listen, guys, right? When we talk about companies like Para Pharma, why do we talk about it? And specifically on this podcast, when it comes to life lessons. So we have been scammed. We have had products that didn't work, steroids that didn't work, steroids that were underdosed, steroids that weren't clean. We have seen for years, going back some years, it has to be said, Steve, products that people were in pain with because of the PIPs, products that were crashing constantly, and so on and so forth. So why do we talk about companies like Para Pharma? Right. I've tried, used, and approved Para Pharma products. I can say that hand on my heart as I listen to this show and as I talk to you guys. Okay, so we talk about availability of products, and as I said, you've probably never had it so good. I said this multiple times on multiple shows. I'm just looking at their product page right now, Steve, with AIs, with Cialis, with Clomid, with Anavar, different dosages. This is just the oral section. I'm not even scrolling down to the injectable section. Dianabol, all the AI there's a Provara, Superdrug. They have all the steroids at the kind of dosages you guys are going to use. If you was a female, use the Anavar 10, Steve, and cut that down to 5. We want products that are safe to use. We want products that we've tried and tested when we recommend to you. This is not some sort of random brand that we've been handed to us. We've got a few vials we want to shift. This is not how that should work anymore. It doesn't need to be like that. We occasionally see on the forum, Steve, people say, my source has this, my source has that. Motherfucker, you're on the internet talking to us. You have availability of approved sources, half a dozen approved sources that have every single thing you could possibly need, international and domestic. They will literally post it to you from the other side of the fucking world. Never mind if you're in the American domestic market, which is the biggest steroid market in the world. So you have to go with companies like Para Pharma because you don't need to follow that bullshit. And there's products that are going to be safe, products that are going to be clean. When they're in talking about injectables, products that are highly dosed used to hurt like a motherfucker to inject. Post-injection pain was the guys. Literally, we've seen 20 years ago, 15 years ago, people with abscesses because the oil didn't agree with them, or because the oils was contaminated. You don't see that anymore. You might get inflammation on maybe 5% of people have post-injection pain, whereas it used to be 40, 50, 60% for the higher dose products. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that anymore because companies like Para Pharma bring you solid products. So what about that, Steve? That advantage, that life lesson from using steroids from companies like Para Pharma?
Yeah, the life lesson is when I first got into it, the first couple of times I ordered steroids, they were either fake or ridiculously expensive. Ridiculously expensive. We're talking four figures for a cycle. Parapharm
Yep,
makes it affordable, and their products are legit. They've been tested. We know they're
yep,
legit. Not only do they have certificates of analysis, we've had people independently test their products, so we know that their products are legit. So Parapharma is definitely great, and we really appreciate that they're sponsoring this podcast as well. And one of the things we talk about on this podcast is how to better yourself. And
yes.
if you're using a steroid cycle, you're trying to better yourself. I hope that's why you're using it, but that's why you should be using it. And Parapharma allows you to better yourself, and because their products are legitimate, so you can actually use their products and get fantastic results. Injectables, orals, as Mobster said, they have everything. They have the AIs you
AIs,
need.
you name it, sex, drugs, EDs, the lot.
They have everything that you're gonna need. PCT products, anything you need.
Yeah.
So go check them out. Come on the forum if you want to find out where to get Parapharma. A lot of people are asking on social media, where do we get it? Where do we get it? Come on the forum. We
Yes.
can't say where to get it on the
Can't do
podcast.
it on YouTube, guys.
Yeah,
Come onto
we
the
can't go
forum,
on
we'll tell
YouTube
you.
and say where to get it,
Yeah,
obviously. But
yeah,
come on the
yeah, yeah.
forum and we'll show you where to get Parapharma. So come on the forum,
Exactly.
join in the fun, get a log going, and then order Parapharma and do a log where you're using
Yes.
Parapharma products and
Yep.
see for yourself how legit they are.
And you'll be helping other members with your log. You'll be passing on information yourself. You actually become part of the circle of information and good advice and even these life lessons. So thank you very much, Parapharma, for allowing us to do this show today and help our listeners. And they help listeners themselves to go on to help other listeners. So that would be absolutely awesome. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.